Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much, my friends, for having me here. I'm happy to be joining you. Usually, when I speak at a group like this, I'll say, "Hi, everybody. I'm Ian, and I'm a recovered alcoholic." And then I almost always follow that up by saying, "Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean when I say I'm a recovered alcoholic?" But actually, discussing the topic of what do I mean when I say I'm an alcoholic is why I'm here today. So, we're going to talk for the next 45 minutes or maybe a little more about exactly what I mean and more importantly than what I mean, what the authors of the book Alcoholics Anonymous meant when they used the term alcoholism. And I think if we can do that, we will not necessarily have a solution to our problems, but we will at least understand what problem we have. And that is a very good start. It doesn't solve anything by itself. That's why there are 11 other steps after the first one, but you got to start somewhere. And number one is a good place to go. So you can think of all of what follows as notes and explanations on what do we do to take step one? How do we take the first step in recovery? And the big book starts on page 30, describing some of this when it says, "We learned that we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion, and this is very important, the delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be like other people, has to be smashed." Okay, a lot going on there. Very, very important. If we are not like other people, what is the difference between alcoholics and other people? That is to say, what is alcoholism? And answering that question is the function of the first several chapters of this book, all the way up to about page 43. And the beginning of the chapter to the agnostic, which is on page 44, summarizes everything up until that point. And if there is one sort of little sentence or so that I could beam into the mind of everybody listening to this, one thing to remember, it is this. They say, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. That's from page 44 of We Agnostics. And the book in the previous pages describes each of these two features in detail, which I'm also going to discuss with you in detail, to help the reader determine, as they say on page 34, to their own satisfaction, whether they are one of us. People use the term alcoholism to mean all sorts of things in popular culture. I was just having an interesting discussion today about the term alcoholism versus the term alcohol use disorder versus all sorts of different words we could use to describe the umbrella phenomenon of different kinds of drinking problems. And it is not my business to tell anybody how to talk or what words to use to express their thoughts. But to make myself clear, I do think I should express what I am using the term alcoholism to mean and what the reader can use to determine to their own satisfaction, or the listener could use to determine to their own satisfaction whether they have the same problem that I discovered I have, which is the same problem that is described in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the same problem that these authors had. Because if I have the same problem as these authors, and I did, then I at least have some hope that the solution that worked for them could work for me. And it did. And if you, listener, have the same problem that I have, then you might find some hope in a solution that worked for me too. But first, we got to figure out, what is my problem? First difference, there were two, remember? And we'll talk about what I think is the easiest one to understand first. What is the first difference between me, an alcoholic, and a normal person is I react differently to drinking alcohol. Okay? This is something I knew about myself pretty early on in life. I started drinking when I was a teenage boy, and I understood that my reaction to it was what it was. And it became clear relatively quickly that I was reacting to drinking differently than the people around me were, right? The way that they say this in the book is on pages 22 and 23, which is the chapter There Is a Solution, that says, we know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive, here's the important part, that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. Now, this may not happen every single time. It happened for me a lot, but the point that they're talking about is that once you start drinking, you do not have effective, reliable control over how much you will drink. And I learned very kind of weirdly late in life that that never happens to normal people, like ever. That's not to say normal people don't ever want to get real drunk. And it's not to say that normal people don't ever foolishly get drunker than they really should and end up regretting it later. And it's not to say that normal people don't sometimes have a drink that's quite a bit stronger than they think and then end up drunker than they sort of like, in some sense, kind of intended. What does not happen to a normal person is think about it like this. Sometimes in life, I've been thirsty. I've been thirsty. I'll have a glass of water, right? Or I'll go to a water fountain. And if I'm really thirsty, maybe I'll drink that whole glass of water. And maybe I'll even have, if it's a really thirsty day, like a second whole glass of water. What has never happened to me is thinking, I'm going to go get a little sip of water and finding myself staying at the water fountain for hours on hours, drinking drink after drink, mouth after mouth of water, glass after glass until I'm damaging my bladder and I have to go to the bathroom again and again. And as soon as I leave the bathroom, I come back to the water fountain and fill up another glass of water. That's never, zero times has that ever happened to me. And it's quite absurd to think that it ever would. That is exactly how a normal person reacts to drinking alcohol. They have the amount that they want to have, and at a certain point, they just stop wanting more. That point may be different at different places for different people. Some people may not like drinking alcohol hardly at all. Some people may like it quite a bit and be quite heavy drinkers. But the experience of a normal person is that alcohol, they respond to it like we respond to most stuff that we take into our bodies, food and drink. We have enough, we feel satisfied, we want to stop. That is not how I reacted to drinking alcohol, not at all. And if you're listening to this and you think that's also not how you react to drinking alcohol, then you may be like me in that respect. But that also means you're different from other people. Now, William Silkworth, who wrote the doctor's opinion at the beginning of this book, was the medical director of one of the, as he says, oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. And in his view, although alcoholics vary in certain ways, there are lots of things about us that are different. They, and this is a quote, all have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing what he calls the phenomenon of craving. This is what he describes as the phenomenon of craving is that thing that makes that I react, that I have when I start drinking alcohol, right? That is because for whatever reason, the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people to drinking alcohol. So that's what unites us as a class. That is kind of the root difference. That when I drink alcohol, something happens to me that does not happen to a normal person. And the effect of that different thing means that I can't have reliable and effective control over the amount that I drink. Now, they say on page 22 that opinions vary considerably on why exactly we have this different reaction. You know, what are the causes of alcoholism? Is it genetic? Is it social? Is it this? Is it that? Honestly, I don't know. I know that alcoholism seems to run in certain families. It definitely runs in mine. But I also know people who are alcoholics who have no family history of alcoholism. It seems like most things in life, probably there are various things that cause this, and I don't know what they are because I am not, for example, a medical director of any of the oldest or even newer hospitals in the country that treat alcoholic or drug addiction. And I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist. What I do know, though, is I know about my own experience. And I know that this description, whatever we want to call it, we want to call it the phenomenon of craving, we want to call it an allergy, we want to call it whatever, that describes me to a T. But whatever the cause, right, this differentiates alcoholics as a class, sets them apart as a distinct entity. And Silkworth says that, and this is a quote, the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class, that is limited to alcoholics, and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So if you have had this phenomenon happen to you, even only sometimes, right, then you are set apart from the normal person who has never had it. And if you don't believe that, ask yourself, Have you ever had this phenomenon happen to you with water, or maybe even something you really like lemonade, soda, right? It doesn't have to just be something boring like water. Have you ever sat down and had trouble controlling the amount of lemonade that you drink? Not me. Not like alcohol. Not the way I have with alcohol. That's not something that happens to me. And it may be hard to believe that other people don't have that with alcohol because it's so central to your experience of it, but it is quite true. Yeah. Being unable to control the amount that you drink reliably is obviously extremely dangerous, right? They say this in the chapter, There is a Solution, on page 21. Here's the fellow, the real alcoholic who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things when drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He's always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly, even dangerously antisocial. Yeah, right. End of quote. Yeah, the alcohol's an intoxicant, right? And the more of it I take into my system, and if I can't control the amount that I'm taking in, then I might end up taking in quite a bit. The more I take into my system, the more this intoxicant affects all the things that we know alcohol affects. I become a worse driver, a worse friend, a worse employee, a worse father, a worse brother, a worse son, a worse at everything. My motor control is worse. The things I say are thoughtless or sometimes mean. I lose my temper. I become emotional, all this different stuff. It's dangerous, right? It's dangerous to be unable to control the amount of an intoxicant that's coming into your body that's affecting your behavior. I mean, the way I think about it sometimes is imagine you had a car where the brakes do not work reliably, but like one out of every 10 times, or for me, more like two out of every three times. But even if it was one out of 100 times, where you put the foot on the brake and the car just doesn't slow down. Well, that's not okay. You would never drive knowingly a car like that, right? And that's because being in a car, you can't slow down is dangerous. And you need to be able to slow it down every single time you hit those brakes, or that car's not safe to drive. That's a lot like my relationship with alcohol. When I sort of get in the alcohol car, when I take it into my body, I don't have 100% ability to hit those brakes. That's dangerous, right? So that's why they say in the doctor's opinion, this is on page Romanet 30, little XXX, that a person with this different reaction can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And they say the only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. This is important because the initial reaction I had for quite a while in my life was to understand, okay, I get out of control when I'm drinking, and this happens kind of a lot. But what I need to do, therefore, it's the most logical thing in the world. I keep getting out of hand, so I need to stop drinking so much when I drink, right? Because I see other people around me are able to do that. And I see other people around me, I'm a fun loving college student. That's great. Other fun loving college students are around me, and they seem to be able to kind of, you know, do this at least semi responsibly by the standards of a, 19-year-old college kid or whatever. So I need to do that. And inevitably, what that generates is little rules that I make for myself, right? I'll start to think, okay, what's a safe number of drinks to have in a given night? Two, maybe three. Okay, let's say the limit's four. Um, or I'll say, how about we just stick to only drinking on the weekends, right? Or maybe only on just like special occasions. So if there's a party on the week, that's okay. Or maybe only when I'm with my friends, or maybe only when I'm at home, or maybe never at home, or maybe this, maybe that, you name it, right? Maybe only after a certain time of day. All of these are responses to the same basic problem, which is every time I start drinking, I kind of get crazy because I can't control the amount that I drink reliably. And so if I have this system of rules, it will stop me from going so crazy. That's a perfect idea if I could stick to the rules. But here's the problem: they're my rules. I made the rules. I can change the rules, and I would change those rules because the phenomenon of craving, our old friend, once I start going, I really don't want to stop. I'm not able to effectively follow rules in that condition. And so I might be able to think during the first drink, okay, yeah, I'm going to stick to two to tonight. But by the middle of the second one, honestly, by the time we get to the start of the second one, I'm starting to think of exceptions, starting to think of excuses. Or maybe I'm not even thinking at all. Maybe I'm just commencing to keep going and I'll do better next time, right? They're my rules. They don't work. And that's why they say, look, the only way to get this going, it's like I'm trying to slow the car down by, attaching a big, parachute out the window or something. It's just not effective. I need brakes. I don't have them in this car. And so I can't get behind the wheel of that car. So, in other words, entire abstinence. I just can't drink safely at all. That's the relief they suggest. Now, this is not typically a very appealing prospect for most people. After all, as the doctor's opinion says, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. That's from little Romanette, page 28. And when I'm deprived, and I did, that's why I liked it, right? I had a big, positive feeling that I got from drinking. It was very powerful for me. And I really liked that. And I didn't want to give it up. And when I'm deprived of it, I would feel, as the doctor's opinion says on that same page, restless. I would feel irritable. I would feel discontented. I would feel, maybe in modern language, I'd feel bored, depressed, anxious, wouldn't feel right. I didn't like the feeling, especially in certain situations that kind of grew over time to include more and more of my life, social situations or stressful situations, or, you name it. But there were feelings inside me that I did not like experiencing and that I knew alcohol would make me feel different. And this sensation, this effect produced, is very elusive. It goes away. And I admit it is injurious, but I don't want to give it up, right? It is natural, I think, to resist the idea of surrendering the, quote, sense of ease and comfort. Does that resonate with you? A sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once. That means fast. Folks, I would start to feel better with the handle of vodka in my hand going back up the elevator to my apartment before the lid was even off. I would already be feeling better. It worked fast, and I like that. So this sense of ease and comfort comes at once by taking a few drinks. And I know it's injurious. I know that, but it's so much better than that bad feeling inside, right? So this is why, going back to the chapter more about alcoholism on page 30, most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. Nobody likes to think that they're bodily and mentally different from their fellows, for one thing. And being an alcoholic, as we said at the beginning, is to be different. And therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. My rules. I see you doing this safely, and I'm going to implement my little rule system that allows me to slow down my car just like you can slow down your car and stop at the red light just like you can, right? Problem is, I don't have brakes and you do. And the idea, though, that because I don't want to give this up, the idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy, there's the trick, isn't it? Control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. It was certainly my great obsession, right? I did not want to give it up. I felt restless and irritable and discontented without alcohol. So I needed to figure out that some way I could control and enjoy it. Many of us pursue this into the gates of insanity or death, this idea. They say the persistence of this illusion, elsewhere in the chapter we use the word delusion, the persistence of this idea that I can be like other people in this respect it's amazing how far people will chase this, how far I chased it. I chased it for a very, very long time after I had an enormous amount of evidence that I could not do it. But I really didn't want to give it up because I didn't know what the alternative was, right? And that is why, despite, as they say on page 31, despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, my little rules, right? They will try to prove themselves exception to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic, therefore I can keep drinking, therefore hooray, I don't want to give it up, right? Okay. The book's authors, by the way, also report trying a lot of my little rules and a lot of other things besides. They say on page 31 of that same chapter, here are some of the methods they tried. Drinking beer only. Here are some of their little rules. Drinking beer only. Limiting the number of drinks. Hey, I did that one. Never drinking alone. Never drinking in the morning. I did that one for a while. Drinking only at home. Never having it in the house. You see the problem? If it's at my house, that's not good either. So maybe I'll never have it at the house. Never drinking during business hours. Not too early in the day. Drinking only at parties. Switching from scotch to brandy. Drinking only natural wines. Agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job. It's self-imposed consequences. You know what I mean? Taking a trip. Not taking a trip. I got to clear my head, right? I just need some time away from my normal life. Or, it's not a good idea. I shouldn't go to Vegas or Hawaii or wherever I'm thinking of going because I'll get crazy there. I'll try not taking the trip. Swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, promising everybody around me I'm going to be better. Taking more physical exercise when I hit the gym. Reading inspirational books, including this one, by the way. Going to health farms and sanitariums. We politely call that rehab these days, or sometimes just inpatient treatment. Tried that myself more than once. Accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. Today we would call that like the psych ward, right? Usually a little bit more of a polite name. And I have accepted some voluntary and some not voluntary commitments to those sorts of places in the hospital. I say we could increase this list ad infinitum. We could add lots and lots of other examples to the list. I bet if you're listening to this and you've identified with what you've heard so far, I bet you can identify several more things on this list too. We've tried every imaginable remedy, right? These control strategies, though, never work for very long. Now, to be sure, sometimes it seems like they're going to. The book's authors on page 30 report feeling at times, quote, that we were regaining control. Isn't that a good feeling? I've got it this time. I've got it. But those intervals, unfortunately, are, quote, brief and, quote, inevitably followed by still less control. I get a little bit better, and then I get a lot worse. And you do that over and over, and you get pretty bad indeed. Now, Bill W., in his story, shares a fairly typical experience regarding how persistent this illusion can be. He says on page 5 of his story, liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, often 3 got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal, net a few $100s. He'd pay his bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly. And he began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. Tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. And here's what I love. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. And there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. Now, you may not be as bad as Bill yet, but can you identify at all with that thought of, look, I know things have gotten kind of bad, but I think I've got a handle on it this time, and ever had periods of sobriety which renewed the hope of the people who really loved you? Certainly that was true for me. And what the authors say, and this is all a straightforward consequence of that first difference that we discussed, and we are going to get to the second one. The first one's very important. That phenomenon of craving, the inability to control the amount that you drink. What the authors conclude on pages 30 to 31 is there does not appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men or other women, other people. Physicians, and this is also a quote, who are familiar with alcoholism, agree that, quote, there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. That's page 31. Dr. Silkworth, in the doctor's opinion, for example, says that the phenomenon of craving, quote, has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. There is no way to fix it so you can drink. I don't even really know. I'm not sure I would have even wanted that. But regardless, I can't have it. There's nothing that can turn me into a normal person in this respect. And by the way, that includes the 12 steps of recovery described in this program. They do not turn you into a normal drinker. Probably have some awareness of that at this point, but it's quite true. We do not have a solution for this part of the malady. We have a solution that works on something else. That's very good, but we can't get, if I started drinking today, I'm sure I would have this exact same bad reaction that I did years ago. So practically every alcoholic, however, as I say on page 32, entertains the idea that, quote, a long period of sobriety and self-discipline will qualify him to drink as other men. But the phenomenon of craving, in addition to being untreatable, appears to be permanent. So this idea that I can stay sober even for a very long time is a very grave mistake. No real alcoholic, they say on page 30, ever regains control. And if anything, time makes the problem worse. Our distinctive reaction to alcohol appears to be, as I say on page 30, progressive, such that over any considerable period, we get worse, never better, right? Most of us, they say on page 33, have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. We've seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. If we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. That is, no lurking notion that one day I'll be able to do it, maybe a long time from now. We have to really accept that we're different. We have to accept that this is not a thing about ourselves that we can change. No one else can change it either. This is who we are. And if we don't accept that, we're not going to make very much progress. So now experience might have already taught you, whether you're in the class of people who has this distinctive reaction to drinking. Be pretty surprised if there's anybody listening to this who just doesn't know if they're able to control their drinking or not. But if you want to know, you can easily find out, right? What they say on the chapter more about alcoholism is step over to the nearest bar room, try some controlled drinking. Just try it. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once, because it doesn't happen every single time to every single person. It's not going to take long for you to decide, if you are honest with yourself, about what the situation is, right? It might be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. And listen, if you can do that, good for you. Unironic, good for you. Anybody who's showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman or drink like a lady. Hats off, right? Heaven knows I've tried hard enough. I've tried long enough to drink like other people, just like the authors say they had on page 31. I have got to stop. And if that were my only problem, my only difference, life would have been so much easier. Because remember, we said there were two differences between me and normal people. Let's talk about the second one. Alcoholics cannot choose to abstain from alcohol. Uh-oh. As they say on the page 23, if there is a solution, these observations, everything I just said, would be academic and pointless, like most of what I say, if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Because, folks, if the only difference between me and other people were a distinctive reaction to alcohol, the solution would be simple. Don't drink it. Isn't it that simple, right? I'd be like a person with an allergy to strawberries. Hey, don't eat strawberries and get on with your life. They say on page 20, we get a lot of typical reactions here. How many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone? Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay out the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. Oh, that hurts. She's such a sweet girl, I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him, but there he is, all lit up again, right? These commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time, they say in the chapter, and which I said to myself plenty of times. So if you've said these kinds of things to yourself, you're included in this. Quote, refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Those are the kinds of things you might say about normal people, right? They refer to people specifically who, quote, have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. Or even those for whom it is, quote, difficult and troublesome, but possible given a, quote, sufficiently strong reason. That's from page 21. That's how most stuff in life works. If I've got a sufficiently good reason, I can do it. I might not go to the gym as much as I want. I might not eat as well as I want, but if I had a really good reason to do it, then I could. I may not like going to work every day, but I go because I've got a good reason to go. I need the money, right? This is how almost everything in our life works, right? And normal people can choose to do that with alcohol. They can just stop drinking it, even if it might be annoying. You may not like it, but they can do it if they have a sufficiently good reason. So they look at us, normal people look at us, and you may look at yourself and think, I've got all the reason in the world. Why do I not have any ability to stop and stay stopped? And the answer is you can't. Alcoholics can't do that. From the chapter, There is a Solution, page 24. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, we don't know why this is true, but it is, have lost the power of choice in drink. Hmm. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. That's from page 24. That means that you can give me, I can have, I can believe every good reason in the world. And like most of us, I had excellent reasons to want to stop and stay stopped. And for some reason, I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. I don't understand how it works, but there would be these moments where I would enter this weird blank spot or something where all those reasons I had to stop drinking, I thought, maybe this time it'd be different. I thought, yeah, but maybe I've got a good reason, or maybe I wouldn't just think about it at all. However it happened, I couldn't stop and stay stopped. There was something different about my mind where I couldn't do it. And it was confusing, right? The authors say they say the utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish, is without question the most, quote, baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. That's from page 34. And it is, who it's most baffling to? Me. It's most baffling to me because I don't understand how this is working in my own head. Even people who, quote, would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished. That means they're surprised. That means this isn't what they expected at their inability to stop. That's from page 33. And it surprised me. I didn't believe it for a long time. I thought I wasn't trying hard enough, right? I thought if I really meant it, if I really loved my son, if I really loved my family, if I really loved myself, if I really loved God, if I really took life seriously, if I weren't such a, you name it, all this negative self-talk I would give myself. And perhaps I did need to take some of those things more seriously. But then I found when I took everything as seriously as I could take it, and when I loved everybody as much as I could love them, and I had as much support as anyone could possibly have, and I was in a situation that was as good as I could ever possibly wished for, I still couldn't do it. And I did not understand why. Now, his story, Bill W., recounts a typical experience. He says, this had to be stopped. It's from page 5 again. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Folks, I'm convinced if you hooked most of us up to a lie detector in those moments when we're swearing off forever, when we're realizing I can't do this anymore, I would have come out 100% truthful. I meant it. I meant it from the bottom of my heart. I am done forever. Bill's story continues. Next paragraph. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. Shortly afterward. He meant business. Shortly afterward, boom, drunk. What happened? There had been no fight, he says. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. Hadn't even come to mind. Somebody had pushed a drink my way, and I take it. Was I crazy? His answer is, yeah, basically. I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seems near being just that. Yeah, it feels like being crazy. I do this thing that I don't want to do, and I don't even know why I'm doing it. Does that sound at all like you? Does that kind of feel like maybe your life, right? Because if you're sitting here listening to all that first part and you thought, yeah, that's right. I can't drink safely. And so that's why I've got to make sure I never take that first drink. I hear this advice given out in meetings all the time. Just no matter what club. You ever heard of that? I can't join that club. I cannot join the no matter what club. I tried to be like a founding member of the no matter what club, and then I would drink anyway. I didn't understand why, and it didn't make sense to me. But I hear this get told to people, and they try as their hardest, and they can't do it, and they don't know why. Bill was surprised. He was baffled, you might say, but he doesn't give up. That's what we do, right? We try again. Bill says, renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed. Confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Ha, right? Now I had what it takes. Then what happens? One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. And as the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I'd manage better the next time. It's pages 5 and 6. Yeah, right? Simple as that. I had versions of that experience hundreds of times, right? I'd walk into a place or I'd wake up that morning, have no intent of drinking at all, really liking the way my life was going, and then, oops, I'm drunk. How did that happen? Don't know. And this mental difference is really puzzling to observe. It's puzzling for us to observe more than anybody else. And it really generates an obvious question. I must have asked myself this question a million times. Maybe you've asked yourself this question a million times. Why do we do this over and over and over and over? Why? Why am I like this? Right? Why do I do this over and over? Why can't I ever stick to this? Right? As they say in the chapter, there is a solution, page 22. If hundreds of experiences, yeah, I had hundreds of experiences, have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? I've heard some of the most heartbreaking things that I hear sometimes are from family members, especially children of alcoholics, who are asking this question. They just want, they'll talk to me and say, why does my dad do this? And it breaks my heart because from their perspective, the answer seems like he just it means he just doesn't love me. If he really loved me, he'd be able to stop. And believe me, I told myself that. I said, if you loved your son, you'd be able to stop, right? And the answer to this question, hundreds of experiences have shown us this. We can't drink safely. Why do we keep doing it? Here's the answer. We don't know why. If you ask him, they say on page 23, why he started on that last bender, chances are what you will get, he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, right? But none of them really make sense in light of the havoc that his drinking bout always creates, right? Sometimes I'll say, oh, well, I thought it'd be okay because I was on vacation, or I was having a hard day or whatever. Yeah, okay, I guess that's a reason, but that doesn't really make sense as a reason. And you know what? It didn't really make sense as a reason to me either, right? They sound, as they say on page 23, they sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. Like, hey, why'd you hit yourself on the head with that hammer? Oh, I had a headache and this kind of distracted me from it. It's like, okay, I guess that's a reason, but it doesn't make sense, does it? Not to you and not to me, right? If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, they say, he will laugh it off, be like, yeah, I guess it is kind of crazy, right? Or become irritated and refuse to talk, right? Once in a while, though, he may tell the truth. The truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. You don't know, and I don't know. I don't know why I keep doing it either. I'm as scared and as baffled as you are. They say some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it, right? Once this malady, they say, has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There's this obsession that somehow, someday, I'm going to get this, right? Somehow, maybe I'll figure this out. But they often suspect they are down for the count, right? And the truth is, the tragic truth is that if the man is a real alcoholic, or this woman is a real alcoholic, this person's a real alcoholic, that happy day might not come, right? We've lost control. They say at a certain point on page 24, in the drinking of every alcoholic, we pass into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. And usually this situation has arrived in every case way before it is suspected. It arrives when it's already too late to do anything about it. There is a complete failure, as they say, of the kind of defense from the first drink that keeps one from putting their hand on the hot stove. The certain consequences that would follow from starting drinking again do not crowd into the mind to deter us. Or if they do, they are hazy, they are vague, they are not strong, and they are easily supplanted, as they say, with the old threadbare idea. That means the idea we've tried many times before, that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people, right? Um, Now, that's the problem. Those are the differences. I can't drink safely. I can't do it. My old friend, the phenomenon of craving, makes that impossible for me. But I also can't stop drinking. This obsession of the mind, this difference in my mind, stops the normal use of my willpower from being used to solve that problem. As they say, on page 24, when this sort of thinking, this kind of weird mental blank spot, is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. He can't solve the problem. She can't solve the problem. Nobody else can solve the problem for them either. Doctors can't do it. Therapists can't do it. Treatment centers with well meaning staff can't do it. Certainly, the support of their family, their friends, their church, the people around them, they can't do it. Right now, there that used to be the end of the story. Right. um, these stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. And but for the grace of God, there would have been many thousands more convincing demonstrations. And here is alcoholism in one sentence. So many want to stop, but cannot. That's step one. The next sentence right after that, because I don't want to leave you on a bad note, on page 25, my favorite sentence in the book is, there is a solution. That's not what this meeting's about. But if you've heard this, if that's you, if that sounds like your life, if you've tried to stop 100 times and you've never been able to, if you've tried going to AA meetings, if you've tried having a sponsor, if you've tried reading the book, if you've tried trying harder, if you've tried going to rehab, if you've tried going to the hospital, limiting the number of drinks, trying out if you've tried everything, there is a solution. Okay? It's here for you. It works. It's powerful. It's free. And any recovered alcoholic is glad to show it to you, including me. First, we need to understand the nature of our problem. Step one is a death sentence. It's a death sentence. You can't drink safely, and you can't stop drinking. That's all I've got. Thanks.